We are a society full of control freaks. We have been conditioned this way. In fact, it is not totally your fault that you have control tendencies, that you have a tendency to want to control things. We have been conditioned in our society to believe that we are the emperor of the world and that we sit on a throne of control. Now, how do I know that? I'll tell you. It's one simple 5-letter word: Prime. Amazon Prime has convinced us all that they are at our beck and call whenever, wherever we want whatever it is that we want to get. Am I right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how trivial the item is. There is no quantity too small to ask Alexa to say, hey, I need this thing. You want a AA battery? I'm not talking about a box of AA batteries. You want one AA battery? Hey, Alexa, send it to me, and it will be there in hours, most likely, right? But it's not just Amazon. It's the way we watch TV. I mean, think about it. I don't know if some of you who are younger, you may not know this, but back in the day, we had to wait an entire week for the next episode to drop. I mean, we were like cowboys in the frontier waiting for a shipment of beans, you know? Like, it was just like it would take forever to get that next episode. And today, we can just dial up whatever it is that we want to watch. I want to watch a movie from the 1980s starring Eddie Murphy. And in seconds, the lion will roar and your movie will begin. And it's also the way we eat. It's our food, right? You can have whatever you want, whenever you want it, wherever you want it, thanks to delivery. You see those Domino's commercials where like popping out of trees and they're like, here, you can have it right here in the middle of the park, right? But that's the way we've been conditioned. And so whatever it is you want to eat, and by the way, if they're late delivering your garlic parmesan boneless chicken wings, you can write a scathing review, right? Heads are going to roll because I'm the king of the world, right? But that's the way we are conditioned, it's the way we live our lives. And we are told that we control things that we have no business trying to control. Let's think about you for a second. Every one of us tends to want to control at least in one area, maybe in multiple areas, maybe all of their life. But what area is your area to control? Maybe it's your schedule. You like to kind of have your schedule planned out just so. Nobody better mess it up, right? Some of you, it's your finances. You're like, you can't spend that. No, we need that. Right? And we're very wanting to control our finances. Some of us are trying to control our circumstances, the way things go and work around us. How about maybe for you, you try to control people. Try to control the people in your world. Or maybe worse yet, you try to control people's opinions of you, what they think of you. And what happens when something doesn't go right? What happens when things don't work the way they're supposed to work? We don't know what to do with it. We get angry, we get frustrated. I mean, we have no category for not having things work the way we think they should work. And so we get anxious, we get worried, and we try to play God, trying to make it happen, manipulate, whatever we got to do to make the thing go the way we think it should go. And whenever we try to control something that is out of our control, it makes a mess. Whenever you try to control something that is out of your control, it makes a mess. So, what is it that you're maybe trying to control right now? What is it that you're wondering, I don't know? And I can tell you, as somebody who has lived most of his life trying to control, because of my own anxiety and stress, trying to control the world, it gets exhausting. It gets exhausting. And I keep thinking to myself, like, if somebody could just step in who I could trust, who could say, I got this. Relax. Man, how amazing would that be? But it would never happen. because I know I wouldn't trust them, right? They're not going to get it done. They're not going to do it the way I want them to do it. Because we all have this tendency to want to control. But I have good news for you today. There is a better way. There is a better way. There's a way that you and I can actually be at rest and know that it's all going to be okay. But in order for us to get there, we're going to have to make 3 transitions. We're going to have to make 3 shifts in the way that we think. That if we could make these 3 shifts, these 3 transitions, it will be a game changer for us today. Now, in order for us to get at those, and I want to give you those in just a minute, we're going to first look at a story, actually a true story, of when a control freak actually met Jesus. In fact, this control freak came up to Jesus, this is crazy, and tried to get Jesus to help him control his own world. And it happens in the book of Luke, chapter 12. The book of Luke, chapter 12. So let me read you what happens here with this guy who comes up to Jesus. He says in verse 12 of Luke chapter 12, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher," talking to Jesus, "tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions." So, did you hear what the guy said? Did you hear how he came to Jesus? Tell my brother to divide the inheritance. Jesus, make him do it. My brother is not treating me fairly. My brother is not doing what he's supposed to do. So Jesus, make him do it. You ever been there? Jesus, you somehow fix this. You somehow make this person operate the way I think they should operate. And what does Jesus do? Well, Jesus essentially tells the man in not so many words, you're losing sight of what's most important here. You're willing to lose a relationship with your brother over money. You've mixed up your priorities, man. And you're focused more on trying to control your brother than on the relationship that you have with your brother. And so Jesus, kind of on the spot, he just makes up a story. And look at what he does. So he tells them this parable. He says, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be for everyone who stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. So he tells this story of this businessman who's just crushing it, right? I mean, he's making money hand over fist. He's got so much coming in. He's got a problem. He's got so much money. He's like, I don't have enough room on my property to store all of my stuff. I have no place to put my side-by-side. I have no place to put my speedboat. I have no place, right? He's like, I got so much stuff. I've got so much money. I don't know where I'm going to put it all. So his immediate thought is, I just need to expand my territory. I just need to get bigger buildings so that I can hold all of my stuff and I can make sure that I have all of my money. And God comes and says, actually, today you're going to die. And now what are you going to do? See, what Jesus was trying to say once again is, you are focused on the wrong thing. This man was focused on the wrong thing. He was so focused on expanding his property, getting more money, that he thought that's the only option I have. and he ends up dead. And God's like, you missed it. You missed the point. You were so busy trying to control everything, you missed out on what really matters. Then Jesus goes on, and he begins to lay out these three transitions that I told you about. And he begins to talk about these three transitions that I think you and I need to make if we're ever going to move from a place of needing to control and manage, or even worse, feeling the weight on our shoulders, like we've got to make it happen. We've got to manage it all. And so Jesus says this. He turns to his disciples, which is just another word for a learner, a student. And I would say that's hopefully all of us here today, is that we're like, God, I don't know all this stuff. I don't know the ins and outs of it, and I'd like to learn how to live life the way I'm actually designed or wired up to live. And so you could put yourself in that category of being a disciple or a learner. In verse 22, it says, then Jesus said to his disciples, to his students, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell them, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown in the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows you need them. But seek his kingdom, and all these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Three transitions to finding the rest that your soul and my soul longs for. And the first transition is we've got to make a transition from a narrow focus to God's big picture. We've got to make a transition or a shift from being so narrowly focused to what God's big picture is for us. Now, as I mentioned, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and panic attacks and even went into times of depression because of it. And one of the things that I know about anxiety and about control is we tend to become very fixated on one or a small amount of little things. And we get laser focused on this narrow little thing. And we think if somebody could just fix this, or if I could just get this where it needs to go, and if I could just make this happen, then I can look at all the rest of the stuff in life. But we get so narrowly focused on this that we miss out on what's happening around us. For me, I got so narrowly focused on trying to fix my anxiety, that's all I thought about. I was thinking about my anxiety and my stress and having panic attacks. And I'm like, oh, and guess what it caused me to do? Have more panic attacks. Because I'm like, why can't I fix this? There's so much else in my life that I seem to be able to manage. Why can't I manage this? What's wrong with me? And I start feeling like a crazy person because all I'm seeing is this, my problem. And for you, it might be maybe an issue in your marriage. It might be a relationship or the lack of relationship, your loneliness. It could be something happening at work, and you become so narrowly focused on it that you miss out. And that's what happened, I think, to the man in our story. He was so focused on his brothers not being fair that he missed out on what was really happening there. And then the man in the story Jesus made up, he was so focused on where am I going to put all my money that he missed out on the bigger picture, on the bigger story that was going on. Look again at verse 23. This is Jesus speaking into your world and mine. For life is more than food. Life is more than food, and your body more than clothes. He says, I want you to get focused on the fact that life is more than blank. What would you put in the blank today? If Jesus were here and he could just pull you aside and say, hey, can I talk to you a second? He said, look, you're really worried, you're really stressed, you're really focused on this issue. But I want to tell you, life is more than blank. What would he say to you as you're blank right now? What is it that you've gotten worked up on? What would God say? Life is more than this. Life is more than this. I'm not going to ask you out loud, but think about it. What would you put in your blank? What would Jesus want to tell you today? Hey, I got it. I get it. It's hard, but life is more than your job. Life is more than your relationship. Life is more than your kids. Life is more than your schedule. Life is more than your health even. Life is more than. You put the blank in. And then he goes on in verse 23, and he says this, a really interesting thing. He says, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to the day? Like what does worry actually accomplish? See, the little secret, the illusion that worry gives us is we think if I obsess about something, if I worry about something, we confuse that with doing something. And we're like, my brain is active worrying about that thing all the time, but you're not actually doing anything. In fact, it's not adding anything to your world. If anything, it's taking away from your world. He says, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? And he uses this picture. He says, let's consider the ravens. Now, I don't know what you think of ravens, but to me, they're like rats with wings, right? I mean, nobody goes to a pet store and be like, yeah, I would like a raven. Unless your name is Edgar Allan Poe, maybe, right? That's a really, nerdy joke for those of you who know literature, right? But the whole idea is nobody wants a raven. Nobody says, oh yeah, Daddy, can I please have a raven? Nobody wants that. But what God's saying is, even though to the bird that's the lowest on the bird food chain, he says God even takes care of rats with wings, right? And he says, you are much more important than a rat with wings. You are much more important than that. And if I take care of this thing, and God's like, I can't even stand to look at this raven, right? But he's like, if I take care of him, if I take care of her, you're much more valuable than that. My daughter, Sydney, is 19 years old now, but when she was a toddler, one of her favorite things to play was this thing called Polly Pockets. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I don't know if they're still around, but they're like these little figures and the little characters, and you have towns that the Polly Pocket can live in and all that kind of thing. And so as a good dad, right, I got down on the floor and played Polly Pockets with my daughter, Sydney. And it was really interesting playing Polly Pockets with Sydney because Sydney would control the entire dialogue of the Polly Pockets. And so what she would do is she would say, now, Daddy, my girl's going to say, I'm going to the store today. And then I want your girl to say, okay, have a nice day. So I didn't even get to add anything to this, so that she would come along and I'm going to the store today. And I'd be like, have a nice day. Right? And then she would go. Somewhere along the line, she got in her brain that the only way the story can go the way I want it to go is I have to control the dialogue. She's 4, right? But she had to make all that. Now, I couldn't say something like, hey, when you're at the store, could you stop at Walgreens and pick me up some Q-tips? That would throw her in a loop. Like, Daddy, you're not playing right. You're not doing it right. Now that's cute when you're 4. It's not so cute when you're 34 or 54. To want to control the narrative, to want to control the situation. Because what Sydney didn't realize is while it's a little scary to let somebody else play their part in the story, she was missing out on where that story could go. She was missing out on all kinds of fun that could be introduced into that story because she felt it was safer to control the dialogue. And what I would propose to you is as you and I struggle with this impulse to want to make things go our way, we miss out on God's bigger story. And by you saying, no, you say this, now you say that, I'm going to manage it all, you're missing out on God's bigger story. God's like, you wouldn't believe what I've got in store for you. I know it's not going to be exactly the way you think it should be. And it's not going to go exactly the way you want it to go. But man, I've got some beautiful things prepared for you. Will you trust me? Will you let me into your story? So that's the first transition we need to make. We need to transition from that narrow focus to saying, all right, God, you've got a bigger story. I want to be a part of that. I don't need to manage the way things go for me. Second transition is we need to make a transition from focusing on the externals to looking at our hearts. We need to make a transition from focusing on the externals of the world and the circumstances of our life to what's going on in our heart. Look with me again at verse 29. He says, do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things. And your Father knows that you need them. But seek His kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Don't set your heart on the temporary, is essentially what he's saying. Don't set your heart on the externals going the way you need them to go. He says, what's going on in your heart? Why are you scared? What are you nervous about? What are you afraid of? Why won't you trust me? Focus on what's going on the heart. There was a book that came out a number of years ago called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. But my favorite part is the subtitle. It's all small stuff. It's all small stuff. Because I think that's what Jesus is trying to get at. The things that we have to make happen, the things that we get so worried and worked up about, he says, it's small stuff. Hey, I've created the world. I've got millions and billions of people that I'm involved in their lives right now. And you're worried about a job? You're worried because things aren't working for like a month the way you think they should? Hey, that's small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. I've got something so much bigger for you. One of the things that I did over the last number of years, kind of on the side, is I worked as an executive coach. And I came alongside of people who were like CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs. And tend to be, when we would get on one of our first calls, they would look at me as an executive coach and they were looking for some kind of tactic or some kind of skill so that they could be more successful, that they could make more money, that they think if I could just get this thing from this executive coach, I would be able to, make all this money and do all this thing so much better. Because for CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs, it's all about the ROI, the return on your investment. And one of the things that I got to do really early in the process with these folks is to say, do you know that all of that external stuff that you're so worried about, it all flows from what's going on in your heart. It all flows from what's going on internally. And so if inside you're anxious and worried and you're all stressed out, it's going to play out in how successful you are externally. You got to look at the heart because the heart drives it all. The heart is what is influencing everything that you do. Your externals flow from the heart. So think about it this way. When you get cut off in traffic, The reason you're upset is because you think inside, I deserve respect. Or maybe, as some of you, I deserve to be first. And they just cut me off, and now they're in front of me. And now I have to go slower, right? Because they cut me off. See, the external anger that you have about someone cutting you off, most of the time is flowing from something going on inside of you. When someone criticizes you, the issue that makes you so mad is not so much that they criticized you, but because what they said picked on, hit the button of an insecurity that was already present in your mind and your heart. And they saw it and they jumped on it. And that's why that criticism hurt you so badly, because you've been secretly wondering, maybe that's true. Maybe that is me. And what I think Jesus is saying to this man is, you're focused so much on the outside of your world, on getting your brother to do this, and in the story, the guy, knowing what to do with all of his money. He says, I want you to focus on what's going on inside of you. He says, because where your treasure is, in verse 34, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. So what you prioritize, what you focus on, is how healthy your heart really is. And what Jesus is essentially saying is, are you willing to align your life with God? Are you willing to say, I want to be a part of what you're doing, God? I want to be a part of that story. Well, here's the third shift that we need to make, the third transition. And we need to transition from the self-protection tendencies that we all have to God's provision. We need to transition from protecting ourselves, looking out for ourselves, to God's provision. God cares a lot about you. But look up here. Look up here. Did you hear me? God really likes you. And He loves you. And He cares about you. And I know there's this tendency, particularly those of us who go to church for some reason, that we live with this sense like God is always disappointed in us. Like we think yeah, but, because as soon as I said that, immediately in your mind, some of you were like, yeah, that's what pastors and preachers are supposed to say. God loves me, right? But if you knew what I was really like God is like that disappointed parent who gives us that look, and you just know, they don't even have to say a word, and you already feel like garbage, right? Like that's what we kind of think a lot of times. It's like, God's disappointed in me because I'm not doing things the way He wants. And God's like, that is not me. I love you. I'm for you. And in fact, did you know there's nothing you can do to get me to love you any less than I love you right now? Like, no matter how bad a person you think you are, I'm not going to love you 1 ounce less. And guess what? If you're one of those achievers, Enneagram 3s, who are like, achieve, you're not earning any extra points with me, God says. I don't love you more because you achieve. But I love you. There's nothing you can do to get me to love you more, nothing you can do to get me to love you less. I just really care about you. Will you let me provide for you? And this is the thing that's been so hard for me, because I've been so focused on, I got to look out for me. Look out for number 1, don't step in number 2, right? Like, that's my motto. It was my motto. Is that we so focus on, I got to take care of me. I got to make my world happen. I can't trust God with something so important as my life, as people's opinions of me, as my success. And so God's like, fine, Jason, you want to do it? You want to make it happen? You want to fix it? I will let you do that. And I will be here when you fall on your face. Now, God's not that sarcastic, but my thought of God is, Because, hey, I'm created in the image of God, so there's got to be a little sarcasm in Him, right? But there's that idea, I know I'm going to fall on my face. And a few years ago, when the bottom dropped out for me, and I thought I hit bottom, and then I got some news that actually I wasn't on the bottom floor. I was on the 3rd floor because I kept dropping and dropping. I had nothing except God. And when God is all you have, you begin to realize that God is all you really needed. When God's all you have, you begin to realize, why did I try to protect myself? Why did I try to make it happen? Why did I try to fix it all? Christmas has changed for me since becoming a parent. It used to be Christmas, I would always, like even in my 20s, I would give my mom this long list of things I wanted for Christmas. You know, I don't know if anybody else does, it's probably only me. Like most people let that go around age 9. But you know, me, I'm like 28, you know, I'm like, Mom, I need this, I need a stereo, right? Whatever. Okay, so, but when I had kids, all of a sudden Christmas wasn't about what I got anymore. It was about seeing my kids receive something that I picked out for them. I remember this one time, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, and one of my daughters really, really wanted their own computer, their own laptop. And we were able to that year somehow be able to afford getting her own laptop. And I remember her distinctly ripping the wrapping off that box, and she saw what it was, and she started crying. And she put her hands like this, and she was so happy. She just started crying. And as a dad, watching my daughter cry over a gift that I just, gave her, I started welling up. Because that's what a good dad does. And do you think for a second that God is not the best dad of all the dads ever? And he can't wait to take care of whatever it is you're dealing with right now. Because he loves you. Because you're his kid. And he loves you. And he wants to just scoop you up and put you on his lap and say, it's going to be okay. I know you think you have to control. I know you think you have to protect. I know you think you have to make it happen. But just breathe for a second. I got you. I got you. So are we willing to trust God's provision for us and let him love us? So here's our big idea today. Transfer your trust to Jesus and rest in his care. Transfer your trust to Jesus and rest in his care for you. Or I love one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit or acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Transfer your trust. See, and I'm learning this as I've been in the South now almost 2 years. I'm learning that Jesus and faith and God and church are kind of part of the architecture for y'all. Catch that, y'all? I'm getting there. I'm working on it, right? But this idea of faith is like right up there with like football and apple pie, and it's like it's part of the way y'all do life. But what I want to challenge you to today is to take Jesus out of the architecture of your world and allow it to get personal. Allow him to get personal with you. Allow him to become part of your inner life, of the way you live your life. Are you willing to trust him, to transfer the trust? And what I mean by that is not, God, will you fix this? Okay, God, go do that now. Good God, you go do that for me. I know, right? That feels sacrilegious. Can a pastor really say that? But that's really what we're doing, isn't it? God, you be my gopher. God, I'm going to pray for this thing. You go fix this thing, God. I'm going to go and control the rest of my life. And God's like, sorry, I created dogs for that. I know the same 3 letters, but they're reversed, all right? So I don't do that. I'm not your dog. I'm not going to go fetch something for you. You see, I want you to transfer your full trust from trusting in yourself to saying, I'm going to trust in you. Now, you may ask, how do I do that? Well, it starts where y'all started at the beginning of this sermon, admitting that you have a tendency, an impulse, to want to control things. Do you know what the Bible actually calls that impulse? You're not going to like it. It's actually called sin. When you try to play God, it's called sin. It's actually the reason that Satan got kicked out of heaven. He said, I'm going to be like God. I'm going to be in control of the world. And God's like, sorry, there's not going to be two gods here. See ya, angel, who's no longer an angel, now a fallen angel, now a demon. Satan, you're not welcome here. And so I don't mean to offend you, but if you're willing today to admit my tendency to want to control and fix the world and fix you and fix them is actually sin, then you're part the way there. You got to start there. Admit, God, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to control it all. I'm going to trust you. And guess what God did? He sent his son Jesus, who hung up on a cross and paid for your sin, your brokenness, the things that are in your world that you say, I've got to protect myself, I got to take care of me. Jesus is like, I'll take that. I'll take your sin. And he died on a cross. And 3 days later, he rose from the dead, declaring once and for all, I am who I said I am. I am God, the Almighty. And I've overcome sin, and I've overcome death, and I've overcome all of your need to take care of yourself. I am your God, and I want to love you. And I want to take care of those things that are too big for you anyway. So stop trying to control something that's not yours. And let me be God. I want to challenge you today. Will you transfer your trust? And the way you know whether you're transferred the trust or not is because you can then rest in his care. You can rest in his care. You got this, God. I trust you. I want you to think about where you stand with God today. I want you to think about where it is that your world is when it comes to the things of God. What maybe for you, it's not transferring your trust for your whole life, because maybe you've already done that at some point, but maybe it's one area of your life. It's your kids, it's your job, it's whatever. And I want you to look at these words, listen to the words of this next song, and just think about, where am I in this issue of control with God? Take a listen.